Welcome to another installation of Transitions in Leadership. I am Professor Omiyẹmi Artisia Green. I am here at William and Mary, where I serve as a professor of theater and Africana Studies and also a provost faculty fellow. And this afternoon, I have the pleasure of hosting Dr. Nicole Hodges Persley with us here for this installation. So welcome, Nicole. And I am going to begin with your bio, and then we'll go right into our questions.
Great.
So Dr. Nicole Hodges Persley is a distinguished scholar, artist, and community leader who currently serves as the Vice Provost for Community Impact at the University of Kansas. With over 2 decades of experience in advancing diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, Dr. Hodges Persley has become a nationally recognized voice for creating equitable pathways that bridge academic and creative communities. She is the former Vice Provost for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the University of Kansas, where she led innovative strategies to embed diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging principles into university structures and initiatives. Dr. Hodges Persley is an award-winning professor who holds dual faculty appointments in American Studies and African American Studies at the University of Kansas. Her interdisciplinary teaching spans acting, directing, hip hop studies, performance studies, African American studies, and transnational performance. She has made significant contributions to theater and performance studies with a research emphasis on Black performance and hip hop theater. Her published works include Sampling and Remixing Blackness in Hip Hop Theater and Performance, the anthology Black Matters, the Lewis Morrow Plays, Breaking It Down, Audition Techniques for Actors of the Global Majority, which she co-edited with Dr. Monica White-Ndunu, Hip Hop in Musical Theater, and Diva Feminism and Fierceness from Pop to Hip Hop. Her scholarship has been recognized for its impact on contemporary performance and its focus on the voices and experiences of the global majority. In addition to all of that, she is also the artistic director of KC Melting Pot Theater, Kansas City's premier African American theater company, where she has directed critically acclaimed productions and short films that have received widespread acclaim. She's also a member of SAG-AFTRA and the Stage Directors and Choreographers Society, actively working within professional circles to advocate for greater diversity and representation. Dr. Hodges Persley is also the co-founder of CreateEnsemble.com, the first collaborative digital platform designed to support artists and allies of the global majority. Her academic credentials include holding a PhD and MA in American Studies and Ethnicity from the University of Southern California, an MA in African American Studies from UCLA, and a BA where she graduated from Spelman College in French, art history, and with degrees in French, art history, and theater, and summa cum laude. Dr. Hodges Persley, welcome, and thank you for being here with us this afternoon.
Well, thank you so much. And it's a lot to hear yourself. So, yeah, I'm thankful to be here and particularly in dialogue with you. And for folks who are with us, I see someone who's a great influence in my life here today. Daniel Banks is in the audience right now. So very thankful to see him out there. And yeah, thanks to Atha. So great, I'm ready.
I think I want to start there. So you said that it's a lot to hear yourself and all that you have accomplished over your career in the past 2 decades and counting. So let's just start there. Tell me why.
I think because it becomes like this phantom of yourself, to a degree, like that is like some material representation of the work that I do, but it is not who I am. So, I am a friend, a mother, a wife, an artist, a humanitarian, one who advocates for others, one who loves people fiercely, Like the way that I see myself and feel myself is not through my credentials and my contributions. I mean, those are my, to me, the activism that I do to advance the work of, social justice. And that has always been what it is, of being able to use my art and scholarship to advance opportunities for my community and communities around the world.
So I think that I can point in my own life to a defining moment or two that has certainly put me on the pathway to where I am now, to the different roles, right? And I could say probably the same for you, to the different roles that you occupy. What was a defining moment that led to maybe the shaping of who you are and now how you're showing up in the number of roles that you had?
Mm, that's really beautiful. Great question. I think those stem probably more from my family than or my witnessing of possibilities and me being able to kind of graft those experiences onto possibilities for myself. So first, I think impactful moment would be um, kind of watching my grandfather, who was a immigrant to the U.S. From Algeria, and being a young child, kind of traveling with him and seeing the ways that he was able to navigate the world. And he spoke like 5 or 6 languages. He seemed to be a respecter of all persons. Like he just was a global citizen. And that was my first introduction to thinking that I could be that someone who saw all people, met them where they were, had a listening ear, a open heart. I was like, I love that. Like whatever he's doing and watching the way he's connecting with people is something that I want to do. Um, and then I would say seeing folks in my environment, I grew up in Detroit in the early years, from birth through about 16. And my school formation was really, going to Detroit public schools, where I was the beneficiary of these amazing kind of post Civil Rights Act activists who were donating and sharing all that they learned in public schools, working with Black and Brown children. And so my introduction through the arts was through these activists lenses who were, encouraging, sharing. I was introduced to Black arts and arts of people of color by these activists, teachers who were giving us Duke Ellington and Ella Fitzgerald and Josephine Baker, like from kindergarten. That's was part of our training. And so I always saw myself as being able to, that coming from a rich tradition of being able to and being called to. And so I didn't know anything different until I ended up going to, non-Black schools and be
Mhm.
marginalized. I had never had that experience growing up. I was in a Black and community. I was in a diverse community of people of color. And I always thought we did these things. And so it wasn't until I was outside of that experience that I was like, oh, wait, someone's imposing limitations on me. And
Right.
that was not my orientation to the world.
Mhm. So how do you transition from how you were socialized in your youth until you find yourself in these communities where limitations are being imposed on you to now moving through academic spaces? And so what did that socialization look like through academic spaces for you? This is prior to becoming, the leader that you are now, just
Sure.
moving through the ranks of the academy. When did you make the decision that you were going to go into education? And then what did that socialization look like?
Yeah, that's great and multi-layered. I would say I never made a decision to go into education to become a part of it. I
Mm,
really came to gain knowledge about my community and identifying, I identify as African American, but also as a person who is of multiracial heritage, and looking at the ways that adds to the complexity of who I am as a Black woman. And so I came back to the academy, I'd say the first time after Spelman, of really seeking that information about theater and performance because I was working professionally and I was seeing things and witnessing things that were happening. And I was like, that just is not true. Like I would see representations or hear stories about, what could be. And I knew some of the history and I was like, well, actually, that's not true. I'm seeing people like Debbie Allen or, the early phases of Bill Cosby or Maya Angelou or Julia Dash. I'm watching these Black women navigate this space and they're doing this work, and people saying that this wasn't possible or that these were anomalies. I wanted to be able to know that genealogy to say, where, what happened before them? And really, I think being extracted from a predominantly um, Black pedagogy that was exposing me to those things in my elementary and early, maybe just right before maybe sixth or seventh grade, and being deposited into white schools, I was, that opportunity for me to learn that was gone. I was kind of getting a dominant narrative of theater history or performance or, American history. So I sought that again and went back to grad school for the first time at UCLA to do African American studies with a focus on, Black theater and performance. And I studied with Marcelina Morgan and Larry Bobo and Carol Petticoat Cecile and Beverly Robinson, like all these amazing all-stars that were UCLA in the mid 1990s. And I just was like, I've got to go back to get this information so that I can be in my community in knowledge, because I felt like I was living in these voids that, I could tell you about this musical theater history, but I couldn't tell you about,
Mhm.
where we began in that narrative. So I was going back to the academy as a knowledge seeker and as an artist. And so I was needed that information to create the kind of art that I wanted to make. And then I was drawn in. The scholars that I met and the artists that I met in the academy, where would tell me, hey, have you thought about doing both? Have you thought about, being in the academy and still making art? You can do both. And I saw people like Anna DeVere Smith, who, was doing this work, or people like, Roger Guinevere Smith, or, many artists who kind of move back and forth between academic and creative professional spaces. And so they became examples for me that I could do both of the work, but I was still I would still had some hesitation because it didn't seem like it was free space. It seemed like it was space with condition. And I wanted to be able to be as transparent as possible about the kind of art that I wanted to do. And
Mhm.
what I saw was a conditioning of artists. And when I was in Black studies spaces, it seemed as if I was getting information that felt authentic and honest about the possibility. And when I was in dominant spaces, it seemed like I would be conditioned out of wanting that very
Yeah.
specific cultural connection.
You don't have to do the Black play.
Yeah. Well, like what else is there? Like, okay, but that's a great play, but like what, I remember studying Suzanne Laurie Parks, in the early 90s, right when she was writing an America play, and and talking about it, being so excited about the work and the disruption and the structure, and having a English professor at UCLA go, well, it's not like really a well-made play. And I'm like, well, what is that? Like, is that going to be, that is not the reference point that I'm interested in. I'm interested in why the work and the critique that she wanted to make needed to take that form. And that
That's
was
right.
exciting for me. And it just gave me permission to kind of think about, I'm going to do this my way. And I'm not going to really look at the parameters of what the academy says, how we have to do this and how we have to show up.
Mhm. Heard. Okay, so transitioning into some of the leadership questions.
Sure.
So you have served as a department chair, director of museum studies, associate dean for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and then the vice provost for diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging, and now the vice provost of community impact. Okay, so this is a series of questions that are really layered, but the first one will be, so moving from the classroom into these more senior leadership roles, How did you know that you were ready? Or were you invited to leadership? Because I'm having conversations, of course, with different leaders, and it varies, right? Sometimes there's an invitation. I wasn't thinking about it, but okay, I'm at a place in my career and now it makes sense. Or you were actively preparing, with an eye towards what potential leadership positions could look like, not knowing it's going to be the vice provost for community
For
impact,
sure.
right? So was it that for you? You were invited or you were preparing all along?
I think I was a mix of both. I think I really had the opportunity to be raised up by really transparent mentors.
Mhm.
Watching uh, Black women scholars in the academy who were very transparent about the work that they were doing, the negotiations they were making, the moves and strategies. And so that gave me a pathway to kind of think through, what do I want my career to look like? More and more, I pursued every level, seeking not to jump levels because I wanted to understand the ways that these roles are connected and the ways that they scale to one another, and also the ways that they disconnect from as you go up, they seemingly have a different connection to the faculty role and more of the structural role of the university. And I didn't want to miss any levels because I'm interested in executive the leadership of the university as a way to think through how we reimagine university structures to be able to, for us to think, how are we going to future ourselves? How are we going to make space for new knowledges within the academy? And we can't do that within existing systems. And I think it takes leaders who want to come in and ask questions of the current systems in ways that allow us to have difficult conversations about how they're not working or how they're not imagining the needs of students in a different way, or how they lack cultural competency and expectations for fluency to serve the students that we want to come through the university gates. And so, some of it was asked, like, for example, my pacing into the chair role was really came out of an emergency appointment. I was really happy being like director of graduate studies, and I
Mm.
wanted to learn that role. And then an emergency presented, and I felt, I came to the academy with a set of leadership skills from working in entertainment. I wasn't, just I'm almost like an accidental academic. I came from strategically working in an entertainment environment, going back to the academy for information, and then getting asked to kind of stay and become a part of it. So, from the emergency chair position, I realized that I could do a lot of good from that seat, and I could help my colleagues advance. And the role of the chair is really to advance the unit, to grow and support the faculty and students and staff. And it's not just about saying your chair, it's really about growing and supporting and nurturing the unit. And I felt that I could be really good at that. And then it was just really kind of a stair step after that of seeing other opportunities where I could do good and advance my reach and impact. And um, that was through the AD job for AD of DEI. I was a big advocate as a chair for more inclusive and intersectional leadership at the department level for us to be able to anticipate the needs of students holistically. And convincing faculty who may not think that that is something that they should do as part of their job became, I would say, tenuous at times, but overall, it was worth it for me because I was serving and seeing students begin to like open up and thrive, or faculty feeling like they could speak and had someone to
Yes.
advocate for them. And so once I saw the flower open, I was like, oh, so if I go to this one, I will have more capacity to do that. And if I go to this job, I will be another person at the table to speak truth to a moment that seems that it is not serving the greater good.
Yes.
And that's what I really want to do. And so even though I have a running joke with colleagues that, yep, that's me, my hand's going to go up again. I'm going to have another question when everyone looks because they know that my hand's going to rise up in the room. I'm equipped to rise up in the room because of my training as a scholar, as an artist, and I know when things don't feel right and they don't feel like they're speaking truthfully in a moment. And as artists, particularly as directors or actors, I have this game with when I used to play an acting class with students, it would say spot the lie. When an actor is performing and we let it ride, we let the scene go or the monologue go, and as soon as the lie rises, we'd have to stop the performance. And it
Mhm.
was a way for us to viscerally respond to see when we're believing what's happening. And I think that happens a lot for us in the academy. Like we're listening at the table and you know it's not right. You know what's being said is not going to advance, is not going to look for everyone, is not going to try to support the least um, in capacity in the room, but yet you just wait for the meeting to get over and you don't say anything. That's something that I just, even from grade school, that's not right. And so for me, speaking up and standing up for those who can't have space to speak in the room is just part of what guides my work.
Yeah. The other part of that question was because you said that your leadership skills were developed in entertainment, then you brought these leadership skills to the institution and you didn't skip any steps, right? So you're directing graduate studies, you move into directing a unit as a chair, so forth and so on. In addition to those things, did your leadership development include any leadership development programs or executive training that amplified skills, complemented what you already learned?
Yeah, I had been in high-paced environments in entertainment, working anywhere from an assistant through like associate producing or producing, and directing. And so I feel like entertainment runs on a fast pace. Academic development is like very slow. It's like, and so but the needs of students and faculty and staff are like urgent, usually all the time. And so they're really like incompatible sometimes. And so I think, I did like a senior administrative fellows program at the university level. I have done leadership institutes at professional organizations, and I've run professional committees, say at ASA or at ATHA. I was, as you know, the former president of Black Theater Association. So I think all of those areas of leadership, conference planning, all of that helps you, in the overarching leadership roles in academia. I think, but understanding that it's business, because I think what happens is from show business, it's kind of like when you're training grad students or undergrads in academia about how to go and apply those skills to the everyday real world market of entertainment. You have this kind of narrative in academia that, well, we're not really preparing them for entertainment. We're just trying to make, well-rounded, grounded scholars. I was like, no, we're actually trying to prepare them to go make theater or to go make art. And I think depending on what school you're from, you could have a different expectation of what you think the student experience should be like. I think similarly in academia, there's this romanticization of academia, like it's this place where we're just thinking and we're just helping people understand and create knowledge, but we're not in charge of their careers or helping them think through that. um it doesn't have to be so much pressure. It's not corporate. And I was like, well, how do we pay lights? How do we pay for productions? How do we pay for salaries? I mean, it is a business. And so I think having the business acumen can definitely help you on an academic leadership pathway, because you have to understand budgets. You have to understand allocations. You have to understand how your unit may not get an allocation because you don't have enough student credit hours and you haven't met the expectations that you set out over the past 5 years, as chair of a unit. So you have to actually meet those expectations. And I think that's very hard for people who are working in the arts to hear, because sometimes people just want to do the fun part. And the other part is maybe doesn't feel as fun. But I think the business part of this and in academic environments, but that undergird all the things we do in theater making for those who do professional work outside, is if you don't have money, I mean, I think there's this badge of honor of like guerrilla theater, like, oh, we don't have money, we just made it with what we had. And I did guerrilla theater for a really long time. And let me tell you, I still do it
Mhm.
at the theater. I'm so much more peaceful when I have money.
Yes.
Pay people their value and their worth. And yes, I hustle a lot, as a person who makes art on a very lower scale of the regional theater scene. But in academia, it's the same thing. You see those allocations at certain units, and you trace those dollars to the value of the institution. So if you think about theater and fine arts being, underfunded at certain academic institutions, and then you look at the units that are highly funded, well, they're big money makers for the institution. And so, I have asked and tried to talk about ways that we can have kind of this UNESCO understanding of certain kind of disciplinary value at the academic institutional level, where we would supplement some of the units that bring some of the, cultural um, vibrancy and uh, civil and social and ethical work that underpins like our kind of liberal arts education. We would have institutional supplements for those units so they can focus on refining and making those things possible versus making, trying to get students to be majors there. That would be added
Mhm.
value to the institution. And being able to shape engineering degree is supplemented by an African American studies class or a fine art sculpting class, because it helps the students see the world in a different way through a different approach or experience. But I mean, so those are the creative ways that I think as leaders that we can kind of take and show the ways that business, arts, and humanities intersect in powerful ways, and leaders who have those skill sets, who can sit at the table and talk about budgets, but they can also talk about poetry, and they can also talk about humanities, and they can also talk about science. That interdisciplinarity really adds value to what we can bring to the table.
For sure. And just hearing you talk about the importance of having a business acumen, it recalls something that a more senior mentor shared with me about, the interventions that are necessary now in this time to help faculty become more entrepreneurial,
Sure.
right, in their work and how they navigate the academy.
And some
Tell
people
us
don't
what.
want to do that. Some people don't want to do that, and that's a challenge. Pardon me. Yeah,
Mhm.
they look at that as antithetical to why they came into the academy. But yeah, I
And
get.
it's real. Tell us what you do as the Vice Provost for Community Impact.
Well, this is a brand new office at KU. I think we see similar ones across the nation of impact and engagement. What we hope with this office will be is to kind of turn what we do as scholars in the academy inside out to the university and to the community. Because I think the challenge is, we have all these certifications depending on the rank of your institution, whether it be a R1 or R2, research one, research, 2, 3 and beyond teaching institutions. Having to prove your value to the community is something that is more implicit than explicit. A big university like University of Kansas takes up a lot of space in the community and the state. We provide a lot of workforce and support resources to the state. But I think office that we don't have on campus is showing what our amazing scholars do, showing opportunities to
Mhm.
translate that work to our students in ways that make sense to our students, and also be able to kind of show in transparency the partnerships that we have in the community, and also build
Mhm.
trust with communities who sometimes we have researchers who may enter into our communities and they may not know the preferred practices of those communities, and they think that they're going to help, but they could also maybe go and cause harm. So we
Mhm.
want to be a central hub to say, this is what African American Studies degree, or this is what a theater degree can translate out into the real world. These are the scholars that are doing that work. And these are the community partnerships that they exist all over our campuses, and that we are maybe not know about. For example, we have scholars in any unit from architecture to physics who may have some engagement or support in the community, but that might just be really inside their research. And so we
Right.
really want to invite opportunities for scholars to have a public forum on our
Mm,
campus where they can share that in everyday terms and
mhm,
alienate no one from the community to participate.
mhm.
We also want to have a safe space for community members to feel that they can have an audience and engage with faculty who do want to engage in the community, but have
Mhm.
a way for us to be able to bridge those relationships and provide protection for the community members and also
It's-
for faculty members. One of the innovations we hope to do with this office is for it not to be an administrative space, that we will have a hub in one of the administrative offices, but we will be in community spaces. So we will be in the library, we'll be in rural pop-up sites, within the state. We will be in inner cities, parts of our community that people may or may not have access to. We'll be in um, conservative spaces where people may think that they know everything about it, but they don't. Invite those community members to have conversations. So, I pitch this as an office of disruption, but also an office that would open opportunities for innovation and radical collaboration with the community. And
Mm,
it's a risk, I think, to some degree, but I think that it will be exciting for us to think about how we might innovate a new way of engaging the community that looks like the way the community engages. And we hope to have a digital imprint. Most of our students are engaging us through the phone. They're
mhm.
not going on our websites. And so we hope to have an app engagement that will spin off out of the office where we can kind of have a responsive connection, just like your Instagram notifications tells you who's posted and what's doing. We hope to be able to do that with the community with the faculty work and the community work that's happening around our campus.
Wonderful. I like it. And I heard you use the word pitch. And so because this is new, was this an idea that it's from your own genius or it's a combination of factors?
It's a combination of factors. It was, one of the ways that, how do we respond to this moment that has been challenging? I mean, this was anti-DEI legislation has been challenging for not just academia, but for across industry, nonprofit, and corporate. And I think we have to ask critical questions of, what are people afraid of? And I think that is a really important question to say, why are people so afraid? And if we can actually listen to what those responses are and not
Yeah.
just write them off, but actually treat them as important responses from our community, then we actually have a place to have a different way to imagine how we're engaging one another. And so I pitched it as not a response to, but a possibility of us of futuring what the future of the university might look like. And
Mm,
I think that us trying to put new solutions in old containers is just not working for us. And I think we have to think about ways that will be exciting for students to feel like they see themselves in it, for faculty to see like they see themselves in it. And I don't know if we have a space to share. And so we will also be kind of engaging with the Mellon Foundation um, Carnegie designation, and recertifications, Justice 40 initiatives, where we're able to bring in those type of accreditation things, but open and transparent to the public. But I'm really fortunate to have a provost who is interested in innovating and supporting broad community engagement and impact. And so I think with what I did with DEI on our campus and trying to really ask for intersectional approaches to be integrated across the campus landscape, that being something that we were able to accomplish. Is it fully realized? Absolutely not. But we have more in place now than we ever have with, impact advisors across our campus and a chancellor level commitment to
mhm,
civil rights that have been, articulated post, the anti-DEI legislation. So now this is an opportunity for me to kind of think, hey, what's next and how can we imagine what does university engagement look like from a student coming into the university on a visit? Where would they find out about
Mhm.
faculty work outside of a way, that they would traditionally like going to look up a professor? But is there a responsive, engaged way that they can go to an office and go, I never knew that by being, in a WGSS major or a theater major that I could be, a podcast, leader, or I
Yes.
could, be a pundit on a major news show, or with a theater degree, or I could be a costume designer by taking, a theater design or scenography degree. And now I could be design sets on the Gilded Age, and I think that we and the academy have to do a better job about sharing in real world, non-theoretical terms with our students about what possibilities are enabled by the work that we do. And
Yes, make it plain.
yeah, and I think sometimes we're in our own frameworks and our own keywords, and if we can't explain it to my mom or my grandmother who are not
Yes.
academics, then to me, who's it for? I should be
What we
able to,
doing?
yeah. So it's really important that I could talk to any single person about what I do, and they feel like, oh, that sounds cool. I would be interested in
Mhm.
coming to hear a talk or to see something you do.
Yes. Um, in the reading of your bio, and actually doing a little bit of homework. So it's not just the books that you have, published, either as a single author or co-author, or the anthologies that you have edited. I mean, you have a number of book chapters and articles to supplement this other work. How has your research agenda evolved and or aligned with your leadership journey over the decades?
Hmm, a really good question. I mean, I kind of, I don't know, I feel like it's all connected. I mean, I think it's like you can look at what I'm interested in writing about, and I think I'm now kind of shifting into new areas now. And what I do as a leader, I don't think that they're separate. I mean, I think if you read anything I've written, it doesn't depart too much from what I've talked about today, or how I lead when I'm in charge of a team and the things I ask them to consider. So I would say that I don't look at them as separate. I look at them at different forms of expressing the same ideas and same
Mm.
agenda. It's just me doing it through different mediums. I look at it as like, you know, oil paint, charcoals, watercolors, still able to do the same type of work, just in different mediums.
Right. Um, I'm going to ask this one last question because I feel like you've answered a number of my other questions in
Oh,
the
sure.
sharing of information, and then I want to open up the floor for questions. So in a book that a dean had given to me, called So You Want to Be a Dean, there's a chapter called Narrating Administration. And the author of that chapter, Michelle Massey, writes, quote, "The roles that prepare faculty to administer also prepare them to minister.
Hmm.
We indeed learn how to manage, distribute, and organize, but also how to care for and attend to." End
Hmm.
quote. So I
Right.
love this idea of thinking about leadership as a form of ministry. And if you agree and or see it in that way, what does that ethic of care look like in your work?
Yeah, that's really lovely. I think just like ministry, I think that uh expectations of how you minister? Is it a agenda of conversion? Is it a one of just a ministry of care and support, no matter what the belief systems or ideas of the people you encounter? Is meeting someone where they are. I mean, for me, it's one of uh, a leadership that's rooted in empathy. It's very much like a engaged bell hooks pedagogical approach to the work. It's always scholarly, but it's always about holistic engagement of the people that I'm working with. So, I say that the rules are there to be discussed, to be challenged, to be engaged. And if they don't serve us, then I need to be able to take that to the highest level of the institution to ask a question. So if it means me negotiating for things like flexible work schedules for, the team that I put together or supervise, if it means that I'm questioning, accommodations of support, I'm figuring out ways to work differently to bring out the best of the folks that I'm working with. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't, because people look at that as disrupting of the kind of workplace environment expectations. But I have now started to negotiate that as conditions of my employment and encourage
Mm.
others to do the same. Is that if you want me as I am, you want me as a thought leader, the way that I think, which requires me to assemble the team and create work environments in the way that I work. So even in this new office, I've asked for remote possibilities, pop-up possibilities, digital interface, not being in administrative spaces, because that could challenge the trust of the community. So, in order to do that, I have to bring new conditions or expectations to the table. And I think that I've been able to do that in a transparent way. But change builds in increments. I mean, and sometimes people will challenge you and won't want to see that right away. But I just keep coming back and asking until I can get enough, of support environments that allow me to kind of move the needle. And then that'll make a precedent for someone else to do it. But
Yeah.
I try to be as open and transparent about the how that I'm going to do the thing, so that
Mhm.
there's no surprises. Because there's nothing like leading under duress of me, there's
Mhm.
no performance of anything different of who I am in the classroom versus who I am, with the provost or the chancellor versus who I am with a student. I don't,
Mhm.
want to have to make those distinctions.
I said that was going to be my last question, but then I heard you say moving the needle, and it reminded me of the conversation we were having offline before we started. And I just think it's important to
Sure.
name the mentors, to name the people whose shoulders you are standing on in your work. And so if you had to offer some names into the space, knowing that the list may or may not be exhaustive, but this is the opportunity, right, to talk about whose work you're building on in your
Sure.
as a leader.
I mean, in theater, I think in our field of theater performance
Mhm.
studies and crossover, I mean, I would say Beverly Robinson. Um, I would say Harry Elam, Harvey Young, Suika Colbert. I mean, the people who made space for me. Did I say Harvey? Yes, of course. The collaborative work I've done with Monica, of course, over the years at ATHA. Um, folks outside the academy, Marcelina Morgan, Larry Bobo, Michelle Elam, folks who have poured into my life over the years, and made space to do innovative things. Other collaborative thought partners like Deborah Whaley, good, colleagues, Eunice, um, Eunice, you guys call her, I call her Eunice. Um, there's lots of people that are thought partners in this work. I mean, I would say our work has overlapped over the years. We've all been on the same page of wanting to advance as Black female scholars in this field, wanting to support one another and cheer for one another and make space for one another. And so that's exciting. Obviously, I talked about Daniel as for, who's here. I think really was such a big part of me seeing myself as an artist scholar, and he didn't even know me yet. I was a student of Doreen Kondo, who's another big influence of my work, and she told me about this guy in New York, Daniel, who was writing on some hip hop theater stuff. I was like, "Who is this person?" And it was like, and I was like, "I gotta find him." And we didn't end up meeting for years later, but really, like, I definitely build on the work that Daniel did in hip hop theater as a pioneer and wanting to document that work. So there's lots of people. But
Yeah,
I feel fortunate to have a lot of folks in Black theater studies and hip hop studies who have poured into me.
good. I'm grateful that you've had that level of support and have been able to build a community, even as you seek to continue making, impacts and building community in your current role as the Vice Provost for Community Impact. I want to open the floor for questions. Daniel, we see that you are here with us, and if you have capacity and or interest in participating in the conversation and opening it up with a question or two, we're happy to have you. Good to see you.
It
Good to
is
see you too as
good to
well.
see you.
Um, Nicole, you're such an inspiration. I mean, you have done so much and accomplished so much and have this gift of being at the right place at the right time. And it's really quite miraculous. And I think one of the reasons that I jumped on this webinar, not only to see you, because I never get to see you, so this was just a way I was going to get to
I
spend an
miss
hour with
you.
you. And of course, you as well, Omiyẹmi. I always enjoy spending time with you as well. But I think, when I saw the title Transitions in Leadership, we're kind of like, the three of us, we're kind of mid-career right now. It's kind of scary. We're like, we went from being the new kids on the block to being mid-career and the mentors, and without any preparation, without any it's like the blip, right, from the Marvel universe. Like, we just arrived and suddenly we were here. And I think that there are careers that are legible, right? I think in an interesting way, even though you've done so many things, Nicole, in so many different ways, there's a kind of a clear trajectory, even if it wasn't a smooth trajectory, there's a clear trajectory. And the sense that something built upon something else, which led to something else, which led to something else. And then I would say, there are careers that look more like buckshot. It's just, for whatever reason, the traction, or the ability to move from one level to another. It's almost like you get blown sideways and then you have to start again at a certain level. And I'm thinking of some colleagues of ours you know, who haven't had the opportunity um, to level up, and who have ultimately either left the field or suffered greatly for that. And I'm sort of somewhere in between, right?
Yeah.
And so I just wonder what thoughts you have about that. I mean, I think clearly sometimes we're the architects of our own, we design our own experience. And so we choose not to put ourselves in situations and environments that could be potentially damaging. And so that robs us of an opportunity to have that
Yeah.
kind of trajectory. But I don't necessarily know that that's only the case. And so I just, having spoken way too much right now, and in kind of throwing some broad observations and questions out there, I would just love to hear your thoughts now, looking back. Obviously, there's a whole lot unknown looking forward, but what are your perspectives, each of you, looking back at this question of trajectory or chaos, for lack of a better word?
That's so lovely. Thank you, Daniel. And you do like you've lived on all sides of the aisle. I don't know. For me, I guess it's just radical transparency. I always offer myself, and I know Daniel, you do too, and Omi, I believe you as well, is that I'm not in competition.
Mhm.
I want to amplify anyone if you want to read anything I've written, if you want any document, you want a job letter, like anything, I want to help, because the more of us who are equipped to be you know, at these table, as you know, Daniel's written about the, you know, the welcome table, like we need to have people there. And so how are they're going to get there if you don't help them? And I think that there's this scarcity mentality in academia and entertainment. It's like there can be the one or the, you know, I'm going to apply for this first and then I'll tell somebody about it. But what's yours is yours. Like what's yours is yours. But I do think like we should be paying this forward to one another if we want it in coalition. And I think that there's also this narrative like you don't want to speak certain things out into the universe because there's like not necessarily always positive energy towards you, which I do, you know, I am of that. I do believe that to some degree, but I do think cultivating a community of people that you can, and then, you know, making sure that you're sharing information. I mean, I will help usually anybody, you know, unless you've proven yourself as toxic or like just not, you know, a nice, good human, that I can't really be around that energy, but I will help anyone. And I think that that's important to keep in mind, that we should be supporting each other. We shouldn't have, like Daniel said, trial by fire. No one said this is how you're going to get to full. This is how
Right.
you do this. Like, and now I tell people this is how you can get to full. This is what you can, you know, I don't want to see someone sink or swim in the same way that I did, because I think when you show yourself in leadership roles, people assume that you have it all worked out. You have it all figured out. And sometimes you're just bric-a-bracking it, trying to get information from people. And so when I gave the toast, um, you know, recently for Harry, I watched Harry from afar, you know, and I was like, okay, first I saw he was the president of BTA. I guess I'm going to do that. Let me write that down on my list. Like I would look at people I admired, like Harvey. Okay, how many books did he do? Okay, I guess I need to do that way. Daniel, okay, what did he do? I mean, and I would bric-a-brac, you know, from those folks that I admire, ways that were possibilities for me to craft my own trajectory on how to kind of get to similar spaces. But I don't know if we talk enough about that part, about, you know, how did Daniel get to be the dean over here? Or how did Martine get to be over here? Or how did you get to be distinguished here? Or how did Nicole, you know, go after these jobs? And I think they say that in these roles, that, you know, white males will apply for many of these administrative roles at probably 20% of the skill sets that match the position description. Whereas, you know, global majority folks, queer folks will look like we will go line item on the PD to match
Yes.
what's on our CV. And then we will go, okay, I think I have it now. And that's unfortunate because I think it takes some really competitive, amazing people out of the pool. And so I wish we talked about creating just a cohort where you could share and ask questions and feel vulnerable for the next steps and not feel as if you are being judged or measured against a future possibility because of what you don't know. Yeah.
I appreciate hearing the phrase radical transparency, because I think when I think about my own journey, it's because I've said I'm interested in, right? So, you know, I show up for, you know, interest in the committees. I respond to the invitations to serve. I apply for positions internally and externally, and I follow up when I don't get those positions, which, you know, some people say, um, you know, I don't know. Some people have issues with that, but I think it's an opportunity to learn
It is.
where, not only where you sort of sat within the rubric itself, but also just, you know, what the institution or office was actually thinking about. In one instance, I learned quite literally that we wanted to see what was out there, right? And, you know, even though we had a job description that read this, you know, we realized, I guess, through the process that we needed this. And so they made decisions, you know, based on that, which actually had nothing to do with me, right? And
Yeah,
so
that's really good.
I ended up as a provost faculty fellow because I applied for a job that I didn't get, right? And the provost said, I didn't realize you were interested in leadership, and now you made me think about a program that I thought about doing, and now I'm going to do it, and I would like you to be one of my first fellows. And so here
Great.
we are. And then we'll see what happens from here.
It's great.
But yeah, just being clear about the interest and being unafraid to not put myself out there as a candidate, as a viable candidate for opportunities that I feel like are in alignment with my vision and where we can have a common agenda, right? Because much like Nicole, I'm going to be myself. I'm going to be clear about what I seek to do and what I see are the potential challenges and where I see there are areas for us to grow and expand and be better than we already are. And here are some of my suggestions for getting us there. And if you are unwilling, right, to have a conversation about how we can mutually, work together to fulfill the goal, then that's probably not, and I'm saying it's not a good fit for me. Not that I'm not a good fit for it, but it's not a good fit for me, right? Because I want to be able to sleep well at
And
night.
that happens a lot. I mean, I think that's also too, like, one can have that expectation, right? But
Mhm.
I think, as you know, Daniel, like for every level, there's another, like you get like another envelope, right?
Mhm.
Of information that you didn't know previously. And figuring out like what is a good fit for your skill sets, because it could be that you're in a vice provost or a vice provost role, and you think you're ready to be a provost, but have you looked at the whole scale of what being a provost in line of from an institutional standpoint, what that means, and the expectations that will come with you. I think sometimes we look through these roles and we think, oh, that sounds good. That's a role that I think I would like to do. But I think, even having conversations like this, where why is an associate dean job different than the dean job? Why is a vice provost job different than the provost job? Like, it doesn't mean you're a provost in training at all. It means that you're part of a provost cabinet, of taking care of a specific set of platforms at the institution, and I think that the more you understand the mechanics of higher ed, the more you can make some kind of prescriptive, strategic vision, discussions when you're on the market, because folks think it's just, oh, I'm talking about me in this role. But actually, it's you talking about you in the role and also the institution within the larger landscape, whether they be peer institutions or aspirational institutions, because, people are investing a 3 to 5 year contract of most of these positions, and they don't want to have to do it again. So they want to see someone with a vision for the role as written, but also what is that role going to look like in 5 years? You're going to be the one taking that narrative forward. And so I think not being afraid to show what your vision is, but also being willing to scale that vision based on the platform you have right now, of knowing you have the chance to go and set the groundwork to bring it to fruition. And you may not be able to set it in motion out of the gate. You might have to put the part
Yes.
in place to get the ground ready for the seed that you only uniquely you can plant, and then leave it for the next set of folks to nurture and grow once you get it out, because you may not be the one to finish the whole thing. And I think
Yeah.
that's something that I've learned over the journey, is that you might be there for the setup, you might be there for the planting, you might be there for the work. Different parts you're going to be there for, but you may not be there for the whole part of the journey.
Yes, Nicole, just hearing you say that makes me think about how I even ended up here at William and Mary. When I think about the faculty that had the position before,
Yeah.
acquire the position and how things shifted, and you talk about, preparing the ground so that the work can be done. In my dossier, I literally had to go back and research, and I named every last one person who had the job before I did, because I know that there's no way that I could have done the work that I currently do in the Department of Theater and performance without those other 6 irons, you know, as I call them, and the sacrifices that they made in order for me to be present and to be able to contribute in the way that I do. You know, so that's critical in knowing about your own journey, whether that's being a leader in a classroom or elsewhere, as you said. You just simply be preparing the ground, right, for future seeds to manifest.
There's leadership at every level, from you know, from assistant teaching professors who are, or even when you're adjuncting and trying to get in and break into a tenure track job, all the way through. You're gaining the skill sets all along the way. So like, just don't be afraid to see yourself in the next role. And sometimes you have to be afraid to just, you know, just get introduced to your next level of excellence. Um,
Mm,
Even if you don't feel like you have everything you need yet, because you know enough people and you have enough support to ask for help. It's okay to say, like, I know I can run this, I know I can do this. I might just have to have a little coaching in this area, or I might ask someone for support over here. It's okay
yes.
to ask for that and to say, okay, I can figure out how to do these budgets. I know I can. I can stay up for, you know, 5 nights to study this and apply myself to it. And to, so I just saying, you know, just trust yourself, and also trust that your why should be, hopefully, driven by something that's bigger than money and bigger than title, because it will
Yes.
never be enough money, and the title will never make sense enough to enough people to get you any more cachet that you
Mhm.
think. So hopefully your why is more than just that. Um, but don't sell yourself short financially just for the title either, unless you can see an end, because the jobs do ask a lot of you, and your mental wellness and self-care are just vital to you staying alive and thriving in this work, because there's a lot of emotional stress, you know, that comes with some of these jobs. And I think that I would be remiss not to say that there is some, you know, emotional or social tax that comes with it, you know. You don't get your anonymity in the university anymore, you know, for every level. You know, you're out, some, you know, people, you're part of that leadership makeup of the institution. So it's just something to consider, that it's not the visibility or financial compensation are all but one part, two parts of the holistic part of the roles that we've talked
See,
about.
now you're leading me to another question, which
Ah,
is going to be my final question
okay.
because it's, but so how do you balance it? I mean, you've talked about some of the challenges, you talked about the taxes that must be paid. How do you balance that? Or how have you learned to balance it? Because you're probably still learning new
Yeah,
strategies as you evolve, right? But
I've done a lot of professional development. You know, I think I've done some stuff like on positive intelligence, of realizing that the passion you might bring as an activist and an artist, like of using those, I talked about it being like a superpower, you know, that you might bring to the role, but you don't always have to have your superpower on. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to be like, okay, I'm using my X-ray vision now, or whatever it is, your superpower.
right.
That you have it, and know that you have it, and that you can read the room and see the room and feel the room differently than other folks. But really, that has to be drawn into your trajectory of how you're going to roll out your plan. um,
Mm,
that you control your timeline of execution. No matter what timelines are imposed on you, you have a chance to go back to redirect what those are based on what you promised to deliver. So if they don't work with you, then you can scale and mediate according to the timeline of what you're going to deliver. I think when you have been raised on a trajectory of excellence, but particularly, Black scholars that are working in this field, that it's 100% every time. It's over 100 every time on everything. And that leads to burnout and drain. And also, there's a level raising that you're doing in the room with other people that they can resent you for,
mm,
because, and so I think that you have to figure out the cultural capital that you bring to the work, and the the ways that you leverage that does not have to be every day all the time. It could be strategically planned out over the course of your work. And also
Mhm.
very strong boundaries around your personal life and expectations. Like for me, I don't engage in a lot of social ways with my colleagues outside of work related social things, just because I need some bound, unless we happen to be friends before I was
Right.
into the role, um, which, you know, could be presented, might be perceived as standoffish, but I'm also
Mhm.
very clear about colleagues and then, you know, friends. Um,
Right.
and then socially, I'm mindful of my social network life, that someone's always watching me, you know, on my socials. So, you know, or things like that. So I understand that they will be the number one thing requested after you make it to a next level review, whether you're applying internally on your campuses or outside. Your
Mhm.
social presence is an avatar of your work. And so, you know, I do highly suggest folks having professional socials that are just for that, or if you merge your personal and professional social, that those alignments are something that you feel comfortable with, because whether or not you feel that they should be taken into consideration or not, they are part of the social liability calculations that institutions make when looking at the work of artists and scholars that they bring to the institution.
For sure. With that, we're going to bring it to a close. I want to thank you
Great.
again for your time this
Thank
evening.
you.
Thank you for being with us, Dr. White. And we will see you on the next installation of Transitions in Leadership.